Hey guys, it's Merce. Welcome back to Harpies in the Trees, where I review horror books with a supernatural focus. Hello, good to see you again. Today we are doing the book review for Remembering the Dead by our St. Clair and also Florence and Giles. Now this video was supposed to come out last week, but we did the Abominable unboxing instead because that was what everyone was hoping for. But I do hope that you like this review video for these two books. I really like my outfit today. You know, I really feel like some, lazy son of a lord who owns a manor wears like these billowy shirts and wakes up late and like has a bunch of gambling debts and lounging around and eating cheese or something. A few things, pretty exciting. I actually won Regina's giveaway, so it's really exciting. I'm going to be getting one of her pillows. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool. Dane Reed's also won. If you haven't seen his channel, definitely check it out. So we're gonna be twins, pillow twins. That doesn't sound very good, but you know what I mean. But before we jump into the reviews, let's do a few message shoutouts because there was a couple that were pretty cool about some of the short story reviews that I've been doing. Just like some background information about stories that I didn't know about, so I definitely wanted to share that. So one of my first reviews for the 60-second short story reviews was for a story from Night Shift by Stephen King, and it's called Night Surf. Kaylee Reed says, "The Night Surf was the original The Stand. I liked it, but it's certainly not perfect. Notice how they talk about Captain Trips? That was the virus from The Stand." So that's pretty interesting to know. I had no idea. I haven't read The Stand myself. My next Stephen King book that's on the list for me to read is The Dead Zone, so that's what I'll be reading next. And Ophelia Falling says, "I believe the Graveyard Shift short was spawned out of King's experience working in a factory. Apparently, there were a lot of rats." I really loved Graveyard Shift. I thought it was just so fun, and it just had that kind of like old school kind of nostalgia to it, you know? It was just really, really cool. And it makes sense that King worked at a factory because the story is very vivid, it's very solid, it just really has a presence. And so that was really, really cool to know. Thank you. Are you okay? Thank you guys so much for the positive feedback on the short story reviews. It makes me super happy because I'm just really, really enjoying it. So Remembering the Dead by R. St. Clair doesn't have a setup because these are 13 poems and one short story. These poems are about love and grief. They're romantic and sentimental. They also feature kind of classical themes and also fun stuff. Like there's a poem about Dracula that I really, really love. I don't know anything about poetry. I don't know anything about stanzas and meters and all of that stuff. If you've ever watched Rachel Oates, that's a booktuber who has a really good knowledge about poems and poetry and stuff on an academic level. So I can't really review it in that way, but I can definitely review it just in the emotional reaction department. I know when I read poetry and I'm just like, it's one of those things. I've written poetry and then just been like, ugh.
I wrote a poem, an epic poem.
Poetry is hard. It seems simple, but it's actually really, really hard. So you know right away when you like it. You know right away when you get it, or when it becomes some type of like, intrigue for you, where maybe you don't exactly understand what's happening, but you kind of are interested to dig deeper into what this means, and so that's how I feel about poetry, I guess, is that. So a lot of these poems I thought were really pretty, and they had a lot of wonderful imagery, and they are talking about themes that I totally dig, you know. There also seem to be some sentimental, personal poems here that don't really say exactly, you know, who these people are or what the details are specifically, but they feel like private moments. One of my favorite poems in here is Dracula. I really like that because in just a few phrases and just a few words, I'm really transported into the world of Dracula. And I wanted to read that one to you today because it's pretty short, but I just really love it. So I think you'll love it too. Peasants fear the mention of his name. Grown men tremble at the setting sun. O'er the Carpathian mountain range, among the forest where wild wolves run. An elegant count who charms everyone, whose soul's as foul as dirt where he lays. Garlic and mirrored reflections he shuns, symbols of Christ, the sun's golden rays. For centuries past he'd spent his dark days inside a casket, a hideous tomb. Pitiful lady, in blood she will pay. There at the window, now inside her room, the beast is within. He comes to her bed. Behold, the dragon, 'tis he, the undead. So I really love that. It completely just brings me into this, you know, world of, you know, traditional Dracula, and it's just beautiful. It's just a vibe, it's a mood, you know, it just really encapsulates that in so few words. Other poems that I liked in here was Obsidian, The Calming Storm, and The Dead. Now the short story is interesting. We have the artwork here. So this story, I believe, takes place in the 1970s and 1980s, I think, around there. And it's about Father Angelo, who is a priest at a Catholic girls' school. And all of the kids are leaving for the day because it's the end of the school day. And he stops one of his students, and he notices that on her body, on her neck, there are marks, bruises. And so he, you know, his gears kind of start turning, and, you know, he's going to talk to her mother and kind of figure out, you know, what's going on. So the story is kind of about him trying to figure out what's going on and doing what he can. And the way that he tends to resolve the situation is interesting, because I don't want to tell you what it is, obviously, because I don't want to spoil it, but it's a chaotic neutral kind of situation. You know, which was interesting, I think. What I really loved about this story the most was there is a character in here who is very intimidating and scary. Kind of has these Clive Barker vibes. It's a character who has these three frothing, like, menacing dogs, and he wears like black leather jacket and has some really unusual teeth. And he just hangs out in this cemetery, this rundown cemetery that nobody really goes to besides drug addicts. So it's really, like, that character to me was really fascinating, especially contrasted with the Father Angelo character. So I gave this 4 stars out of 5 because I liked the majority of the poems, and the short story was really cool. And I think that character, like, I'm just really never gonna forget him. Regina did send this to me as a gift, so I thank you so much, Regina. Florence and Giles are living with their uncle at Blythe House. Their uncle is not there living in the house with them, though. He's off somewhere else, working somewhere. So these kids basically are being taken care of by the staff of the house. So there's nobody else, just the servants and the kids. But eventually Giles is put into a boarding school, and Florence is left at home to do womanly things like needlepoint. Their uncle is very traditional and doesn't believe that women should be able to read or write. But Florence has taught herself how to read. And so she sneaks off to the library and she has to hide this from everybody. And this is how she kind of spends her time reading all day. At some point though, Giles is sent back home. There's some incident that happens and they're just like, he's not ready for boarding school yet. So they send him back. And so now it's Florence and Giles. However, they have just learned that they're going to be getting a governess. And the idea of getting a governess does not sit well with Florence. She's having these premonitions, these ideas that this new governess is going to be a really bad idea. And so she is already in motion to try and prevent anything bad from happening to her brother or to herself. I had a really hard time getting into this book for a while. It was towards like maybe really close towards the end where it was really picking up and it was getting interesting, but it's very slow. I didn't find it atmospheric and I didn't really find it creepy or anything. It was just sort of like we're hanging out in Florence's head and sort of seeing the world as she sees it. And we're hearing all of her assumptions about everything. So you really don't know what's real and what's not real, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I just didn't really trust her as a character from the get-go. I just didn't really jive with her. And I just felt she was like there was something weird here, You don't really spend a lot of time with any of the other characters, so there's really you don't really get connected to anyone. Florence was not really a character that I necessarily cared about either. I don't think it's a bad story. I think it's a good story. It just really wasn't for me, I don't think. My problems with it might seem nitpicky, but it was mainly because of Florence's made-up language. And the language isn't really so much made up as she's just sort of kind of putting suffixes and prefixes wherever she wants on any word that she wants. And sometimes when there's like 4 or 5 or 6 of those words in a paragraph, it was hard for me. I would just get pulled out and distracted by the words constantly, so that I was never really falling into the story. Towards the end of the book, I was getting more used to it, but I was doing really weird stuff while I was reading it. I was having this really weird thing where I would just sort of rewrite the sentence in my brain, and that wasn't very pleasant. So I want to be able to read something and not have to, do work to, I guess, like get through it, I suppose. So I think one of the catalysts for me having so much issue with this too is that I'm learning German. I'm illiterate in German, for the most part. I wouldn't take words like machen, like to make, and then be like, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and just add some weird suffix or prefix in front of that, because it wouldn't work. It wouldn't even make any sense unless I had seen it somewhere else. So I think I just really wasn't buying the language thing too much. But she does make up her own words that don't exist, and I was fine with that because it's not a word that exists in our lexicon, so it doesn't really matter. It can mean anything. You can do anything with it. I forgot to say this in the video, so I just wanted to add it real quick, which was I thought that this creative language thing that Florence was doing was going to be have a bigger impact on the story, or kind of be something that was more important to the story, but I think it was pretty ancillary, and it was more of a quirk, which I wasn't expecting. I think that if that wasn't part of the story, that wasn't part of her character, I don't think it would have made it a bad story. I don't think it would have been detrimental at all. The story is definitely familiar. It's something that you've heard before or seen before, but it is interesting, and it does kind of come to a place where you're like, oh, that's pretty crazy, I did really like though when Florence was sneaking around and trying to find answers for stuff. I thought that was really, really fun. And there were some scenes that were just really really cool to imagine, The ending is okay, but to me, I felt like it was a little bit implausible, just because for everything to kind of work, it had to be perfect. So it was a bit of a stretch for me. I was hoping for, you know, some more atmosphere and mood. That's really kind of what I was looking for a little bit. And there are moments in here when it is tense and there is atmosphere, but it's not really that often. I think one of the things that were beginning to kind of like wear me down was being in Florence's mind and just having to like rehash so many things over and over and over again. You know, I was just kind of skimming the page at some spots because of that. I did go onto GOODREADS after I read the book because I wanted to see if people had similar problems that I had, specifically with the language. And there were some, but not that many. There were some though, that kind of just found it kind of distracting. But there were also a lot of people mentioning that they had a lot of questions in the end of the book. My experience with the ending was that I felt pretty good about what I think was happening, what had happened. And I think whatever questions I had were not like really dire for me to know, you know, like there was some white noise, but that's okay, you know. I feel like in theory, I should have really loved this book. I feel like there's a lot of elements here and situations and just stuff like that that I normally would totally love, but I just didn't mesh with this book. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, sometimes that's just gonna happen. You're just not going to click, and that's okay. So my rating for Florence and Giles is 3 stars out of 5. It's a good story. It's just for me, for my preferences, I just really didn't mesh with it. So if you've read Florence and Giles, let me know down below in the comments. You know, did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think that I totally missed the point? If you like this review, please like and comment. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And besides that, just please take care of yourselves, look out for each other, and I will talk to you next time.